So today we're going to talk about growing and cooking herbs, and we're with Mulberry Public Library, and anybody there who's watching, hello. And so just thank you all for joining us. We really are glad you're here. And so today we get to talk about, a lot of fun stuff. So to get going, my name is Andrea, and I'm on the left there, and then I work with the University of Florida, and I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences agent. So I know, and I love talking about food and nutrition, so that's my specialty. And then Anne, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Anne Yasalanis. I'm the Residential Horticulture Extension Agent and Master Gardener Volunteer Coordinator at IFAS Extension here in Polk County.
And so then, if you haven't used this platform, you could, sometimes those controls kind of hide at the bottom of the box, or they do for me anyway. If you hover over the bottom, they should show up again, and then you can click, there's a dot, and that will, you can click on it and it'll pull up a chat box option, and that's where you can type in any questions that you have. If you have any during the presentation, or Bethany, if you have any questions from anybody at the end, we can unmute everybody too and just have you guys ask questions if that's easier. And so, we'll get you our contact email at the end for sure. And so we have a short evaluation following this webinar, so I'll try to send that out to those who are on just to get your feedback on how this went and everything. And it's going to go even better now that we're all on. So it'll be good. So, Anne, if you want to take it from here, then thanks. And I'll stop my sharing. So Anne's going to pull up hers so we can streamline it. You got it.
All right, are we good? Can everybody see my slide?
Yep, it looks great, Anne.
Okay, I think I meant to start here, but that's okay. So thanks so much for joining us. So Andrea and I obviously have different specialties, and we're going to talk about both growing and cooking herbs today. So I'm going to talk about the growing part, and I'll go into a few of the herbs that we can grow here in Central Florida, and it's a good time to start many of them. And then Andrea will take all those herbs that I talked about growing and talk about their health benefits and how to prepare meals with them. All right, so growing herbs. So I have two graphics to show you here. We have spring and fall herbs. And I guess kind of what I want you to take away from these two graphics, I clearly know it's not spring, we're going into fall. We can plant the same things at about the same time of year. So if you saw on the previous slide, it had same coriander, basil, lemon balm, chives, all of those things. In the fall, we have two couple additions to herbs that we could plant. So this is the time of year that we can take advantage of some of our bulbing types of herbs. So many of you, if you've grown herbs before, you've grown, basil year round or different times of the year. And most herbs are that way, except for those bulbing types that need to go through that cool weather that we'll have in the winter time. So all this just to say is most things we can grow during most of the year, with the exception of some of our summer months when it's really hot. So what's the best location for planting herbs? And you can see in this picture, there's a lot of different ways to grow herbs. So in the ground, in a container, the main thing is to just select a location that makes it easy and convenient for you to harvest and use the herbs, because that's the main point of growing them. In addition to providing them with what they need, obviously, which is the proper light requirements, water, and soil requirements. So if you look in this photo here, we have pictures top left of growing in a raised bed, to the top right growing in the ground, to the bottom left all in different types of containers, to the bottom right in hydroponic or soilless growing types of containers as well. So any of those things work. It just is what is best for you. There are a lot of different ways to start herbs. obviously we have seeds, cuttings and divisions. So seeds, pretty obvious. We'd either be collecting seeds or getting seeds from friends or purchasing seeds. And both our annual and perennial herbs can be grown from seed. And you can purchase seed for herbs at mini garden centers. There's also some online sources for purchasing seeds as well, particularly if you're looking for some unusual things. The University of Florida has a nice handout on seed sources that lists a bunch of different mail order type of seed companies, which is really great. You can also start seeds from, or start herbs from cuttings. So that would be cutting new growth and either starting a new plant in water and encouraging roots to grow that way, or starting that new cutting in soil. And you can do that with most of our soft perennial type of herbs. There are some herbs that'll get big and are perennial herbs, and some that do get kind of woody. So like rosemary and tarragon are two of those. And those can be divided. And basically what that means is to start a new plant, you can basically cut apart your existing plant. So for example, rosemary, if it gets really large, you can cut it into 4 and leave one there and move 3 others somewhere else, or share it with a friend or something like that. So that makes it pretty easy to start new plants that way. Additionally, we have our friend mint that spreads pretty rapidly by runners. So that means it's spreading kind of by above ground stems. And if you've ever seen or grown mint before, it spreads above ground and you can see the little roots kind of shooting out above the soil surface. And those can easily be rooted in, again, water or soil as well. So there's lots of options for starting herbs in your herb garden. We also need to think about design and what we want to grow. And there's lots of ways to think about it. There's lots of ideas for things like bath gardens and pizza gardens. This is a good time of year to start like a salad type of garden, because it is the time of year that you'd be starting things like lettuce and greens and stuff like that, and the herbs would go right along with it. But really just growing what you eat is what I would start with. Just a couple of small containers or one plant in the ground is a really easy way to get started. You don't need to design something fancy to start. We want to make sure that we're using the herbs that we're growing. And if you do any butterfly gardening, you know that planting a couple extra parsley or dill or fennel or something like that is great for our butterfly friends as well. If you do decide to grow herbs in containers, it's pretty easy to do. You can see some of the combinations here. The main thing to remember here is you want to have a good container with drainage holes in the bottom, a well-drained soil mix, and we have some recipes on making that. And then making sure they have enough sun and that you're spacing them properly. So you can see some combinations here. You can see we've got one container oregano, parsley, or flat leaf parsley, curly parsley. That's great. But we want to make sure that we know how big our herbs are going to grow before we combine them in a container. And I would say about a minimum size container to grow 3 to 4 herbs together would be like 18 to 24 inches across. So you do need a pretty large container if you're going to go grow a couple of herbs. You know, and I'll talk a little bit about size of these when we get into the specific herbs. So if you've grown vegetables before, the soil prep and fertilization and watering is very, very similar. So in addition to growing them in containers, again, you can add herbs to your ornamental landscape. And many people do this. Again, if you plant for butterflies, many of the herbs are larval food sources for our butterfly larvae. And so butterfly gardeners plant this stuff right in with their ornamental plants. But that's not to say that you can't do that even if you don't grow plants for butterflies, because many herbs have a really nice not only aroma, which can play a part in the landscape, but also a pleasing look. So in this picture here, you'll see the top left, this plant in the foreground is rosemary, and it's planted in pretty much a perennial garden. And so this is a nice addition to a landscape. Rosemary makes a great shrub, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about rosemary. And then in the bottom picture, this homeowner has used chives to line the outside of a landscape bed. So think about incorporating our edibles into our existing landscape. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about a few of the common herbs in Central Florida. All right, the first one here I'm going to talk about is basil. Many people have planted this before. You can start it now. It's a pretty easy to grow annual plant, particularly in cooler weather. It can be pretty tricky to grow a lot of these herbs through the summer months. Some can do it, but when we talk about seasonality and when we're planting herbs, we kind of have a cool season and a warm season. And some can last a little bit longer either way. That doesn't mean, you know, they're only going to last 1 month or they're only going to last, you know, October to December, nothing like that. You can kind of push them either way depending on how you know, care for them and prune them back and those sorts of things. So basil is a pretty easy one to grow. People are familiar with it. There are some fun varieties that you can plant. You can see here, purple ruffles, the pesto, perpetuo, Siam queen. There's a bunch of varieties that not only make for a unique herb, but you could see they have some ornamental qualities. So they would be great planted in your landscape, put in a container with some flowering plants, that sort of thing. So think about multiple ways that you can use these herbs in your landscape in addition to just having them growing them for herbs and eating them yourself, right? All right, this next one here is dill. This one's pretty easy to start from seed or plant. The large mammoth dill is one that you can grow here. Very nice yellow flowers. I have a picture in the next slide of the seed heads here. You can see there are a number of varieties available. The fernleaf dill is one. Bouquet is one that is pretty widely grown. Hera is one that produces a lot of foliage. You can see, again, very attractive yellow flowers. This is another one that butterfly gardeners are pretty familiar with. And you can see here the seeds, what they look like, have an ornamental quality as well. And again, you can collect seeds from your existing herbs for your next season of planting. Parsley, lots of people familiar with parsley. Oftentimes, this is a picture of flat leaf parsley. Sometimes people get it confused with cilantro, but take a really, really close look at the leaf shape here. And then my next herb is cilantro, so you'll be able to see the difference a little bit. This is a good plant for cool season herb gardens. It can be really tricky to grow this through the summer months. So if you like to grow parsley, this is a good time of year to get that started. So September and October is when we're starting our cool season. I know today feels a little bit cooler, but typically, you know, it's still pretty warm and it's hard to think about planting cool season plants, but that's when we're going to be starting our cool season herbs. And you can start parsley from seed or from small container plant. You can see some of the varieties here. The curly leaf, Lisette's a really very curly leaf and it's more heat tolerant than some. And then the flat leaf parsley, although it has a funny color in this photo, is just regular flat leaf parsley. And again, this is a great plant for butterflies. If you are attracting butterflies, I would say plant 3 or 4 of whatever type of herb that you're choosing to grow so that you can have some, and then the butterflies get those as well. All right, so here's a close-up of a cilantro. So hopefully you can see the difference there in the leaf. Our parsley, our flat leaf parsley, had a very pointed leaf, and this has a very rounded leaf tip. So that's the difference. This is another one, just like parsley. This is a cool season herb. So this is not something you're going to be able to grow through the summer months. If you had to get your cilantro fix in the summer months, many people instead plant culantro, which is C-U-L-A-N-T-R-O, and it looks totally different, but has a very similar flavor. So this is a good one to start now. You can start by seed or small plant. And then the seed of the cilantro is coriander. So if you're looking, kind of get the two different flavors in one if you grow a cilantro. Rosemary is an herb that is a woody plant, meaning it develops a hard wood, and it is a perennial. So unlike cilantro, that when the temperatures get high, it'll start to die back. And typically what will happen is you'll have to get a new plant. It can be hard to keep it for very long, season to season, but rosemary is pretty long lasting. So it's often used as a small shrub in the landscape, and it does really, really well that way. It's very drought tolerant. In fact, it prefers to be dry. Has lovely little pink flowers in the spring, and you can see here in this photo on the left that this is a weeping prostrate variety, so it's kind of a weeping variety that's just used as a ground cover in the landscape. The regular rosemary can be used as a small shrub. The regular rosemary is going to be 3 feet tall and wide, and so if you're looking for a drought tolerant shrub that looks a little bit unique, I think rosemary would do really well. It also was really nice to plant, you know, along your front walkway or something like that in the picture, you know, kind of a scene in the picture, because it has a nice fragrance. And so that's something sometimes people like to think about when they're thinking about the entrance of their house, and, you know, that has a nice smell for someone walking up to the front of their house when we think about, you know, curb appeal and things like that. And this variety here, barbecue, has very straight, long stems. So oftentimes rosemary is used for skewers and things, and barbecue has that nice straight stem for that. The next herb here is oregano. We talk a lot about the Cuban and Greek oregano. They're very different, but they can both be grown from seed or cuttings or purchased as small plants. The Cuban oregano has a very thick leaf. I'll show you what that looks like here. So if you look at those top two pictures, the Cuban versus the Greek oregano. So the Cuban oregano leaves, although you can't really tell in the picture, they can get, you know, 3 to 4 inches wide. They're really big, gets really tall. And the Greek oregano has much smaller, kind of more thin, fine, delicate leaves, and stays much more low to the ground, you know, maybe only a foot or so tall and wide. And actually, I've had a Greek oregano that's lasted 3 or 4 years now. So that can definitely happen with the Greek oregano. It does get a bit woody, while the Cuban oregano does not. And the Cuban oregano is very, very easy to just, as it grows, it gets pretty tall and leggy, to just cut a piece and root that in water. It does it really easily. And you can see here the Cuban oregano, golden oregano, even the variegated, again, nice additions to an ornamental landscape, a container with flowering plants, that sort of thing. All right, the next one here is mint. Lots of people are familiar with mint and the way that it spreads. So it does spread by runners. So you may want to consider planting it in a container. Hanging basket works. You can see here in a container, it looks really attractive. And probably if you're going to grow it in a container, you want to keep it to just the one mint and not try and put in, you know, 3 or 4 other herb varieties, because it will kind of grow over everything else. And there are a lot of fun varieties of mint. You can see here chocolate mint and pineapple mint. There's even more varieties. If you were to go to a garden center, usually you can find, you know, 4 to 6 different types of mint. So it's kind of fun to try those out. You can do a lot of fun things with those in the kitchen as well. But mint is pretty easy to grow most of the year. Even through the summer months, it can hang on. Oop, I don't know what happened to that slide there. We'll click to the next one so you can see the tarragon a little bit easier. So tarragon is another one that will get kind of woody, very similar to the rosemary. Now, I've had my rosemaries last much longer than tarragon, but tarragon will last usually a couple of years. So it's perennial. I actually like it in the ground as kind of an edging for a landscape bed. It looks really nice. You can see it has really attractive yellow flowers. So this is a nice ornamental plant. Not commonly grown from seed, but you could certainly divide it, and you can purchase, you know, the small starter plants. Usually when you're purchasing herbs, At a garden center, they're in, you know, the little 4-inch containers, and this is one that you would definitely find at a garden center. All right, our next herb is thyme. This is another kind of a woody herb. It's usually very short, so less than a foot tall normally. Very small leaves and really nice, kind of a light purple flower. You can see in the picture here kind of what it looks like growing in a container. Again, this is another one that it has a really nice quality by itself in a container, but it doesn't get huge. So I think if you had a large enough container, again, that 24-inch round container or something, you could plant a couple taller herbs in there, no problem. But it also, again, would look really pretty with some flowering perennials or annuals in a container or in the ground as well. And you can see there is a variegated lemon thyme, and that variegation in the herbs adds just a little something extra for ornamental quality. So that's a fun thing. All right, lots of people familiar with sage. This is another one to start now. This is a cool season herb. So you can start that now. Very small plant. So this is a good one to plant in a container with a couple of other things. And you can see here there are some nice varieties available. So the top left picture is kind of the typical sage that you would be familiar with, kind of a gray-green leaf. But the golden sage and the tricolor sage are some nice options just for that ornamental quality again. And sometimes, you know, ornamental quality, we think about that in the landscape, but when you think about bringing that in and using it like in a salad or something you're cooking, you get kind of something else unique too. You know, some of these very colorful leaves or variegated leaves or things like that can make something really attractive when you're cooking it as well. So you kind of get double benefit from those. But again, this is another one that look really pretty with perennial flowers. You could plant some other herbs in there and get some fun texture and color combinations with the sage. This is lemon balm. The leaf shape looks very similar to a mint because it is in fact in the mint family. But this is a more upright growing herb. So this grows more similarly to like a basil than it would a mint. And it does not spread like mint does. So this will, you know, clump about 1.5 to 2 feet tall. And you can start this in the spring or the fall. Sometimes it will kind of go through the summer months and not have a problem. But, you know, really fall and spring are a good time to start most herbs. There is a couple of varieties available. This is a variegated one, Aria, you can see on the left here. Again, nice ornamental quality to this one. When we talk about herbs and maintenance and harvesting, there's a few things to remember. So if we're harvesting them to eat, we want to remember to cut the leaves before the flower heads or seed heads are developing or opening, and cutting them multiple times or very severely to use the herbs is not a problem. A lot of times the herbs will start growing again. Actually, they'll look better a lot of times if you cut them back. And again, most people are growing the herbs to use them. So I would encourage you to really cut them back, use them. Things, you know, if you're thinking lemon balm and basil, you can cut them very low back to the ground and they'll come back again. But once they start to go to seed, they really start to decline. You could lose the plant at that point. Typically, they're pretty leggy, kind of lanky, don't look as good at that point as well. Now, if you want to collect seed for the next season, you will need to obviously let them go to seed. So you maybe want to pick 1 or 2 plants that you're going to allow to go to seed so you can collect it, and one you're using, or just realize that, you know, I've grown my, you know, basil for this long. I would like to grow the same type of basil next season. So I'm just going to let it go to flower, collect the seed, and let it go for now. And that's, you know, that's not a problem at all. We do want to allow the seeds to dry on the plant for as long as we can. So think back to that photo of the dill where the seeds were brown on the plant. If you can do that and then harvest them, that's the best way to do it. But certainly we want to make sure that before we pack any of the seeds away, that the seeds are totally dry. So let them dry as long as you can on the plant. And then before they're stored, they do need to be very, very dry. So just some takeaways for harvesting and curing. We really want to dry them as best we can. Air dry can be hard with all of our air humidity. And so dehydrator, oven, those sorts of things can be used. But we want to make sure, the takeaway is that we do want to make sure that they're totally dry before storing them, both the seeds and if you're drying the herbs to use at a later date as well. And you certainly can freeze them. There's a couple different ways. I think Andrew will talk about that. If you're worried about getting all of the moisture content out of the foliage before storing it, you may want to consider freezing it, just, you know, as an easier option, just because of all the humidity in the air. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share now, and Andrea will go ahead and take over with her section, and we will get all of the questions out of the chat at the end. So even if you have growing questions, you can type them in the chat now, and we'll get to all of that at the end, or you can just hold them till the end as well.
All right, can you see my screen okay? And guys all see it okay?
Yes, it's good. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
No, thank you. Sorry, everybody, make it review from last time here. Quick going through. I think I actually have Greek oregano pictured behind me, and I believe that's correct. Okay, so we're coming, you guys. So cooking with herbs, so that's my portion now. So I'll just be talking about, you know, the storing, preparing, like Ann was saying, cooking them, and then freezing and drying them, like cooking them, or cooking with them is what I meant to say. But lots of fun things you can learn do with herbs, and so we'll try to talk about a few of those. And, you know, just kind of what Ann was saying, but just to reiterate on my part, you know, the difference between herbs and spices. Herbs, they're the leaves of the plants, and so they don't have those woody stems, and they grow up close to the ground in the mild climates. Then the spices, they're more like warm tropical climates. They're from the roots, the flowers, the fruits, the seeds, and the bark, you know, like cinnamon or nutmeg, or Anne was talking about like cilantro, right, from the seeds. So stronger and more potent flavor, and they are used in smaller amounts in cooking. So that would be the key takeaway there. Then I just wanted to talk to you about the health benefits too. You know, besides them not only smelling great outside, attracting butterflies and things like that, which are great for the environment, the things that they do for our health are quite enormous. Somebody told me they were kind of like eating little salads every time you just sprinkle something on there, and you get some of the benefits, you know, even with those dried ones that you don't always have to have fresh. So that is great. So it adds the flavor, and then it allows you to reduce salt and fat sometimes, because you don't need as much because you're using these things that are actually good for you also. And quick study, if might have heard this before, but just so highlights 148 people, right? So it'd be people like you, and they consume these three different meatloafs and two different side dishes. So they prepared the meatloafs slightly different way, and the side dishes slightly different. So the meal conditions, like they had the full fat meatloaf straight on, then they did like a reduced fat kind of, tried to kind of make it a little bit healthier, and same with the side dishes. And then on the third one, they made like the meatloaf, and then they put some herbs and spices in there, but they also reduced the calories and made it a little healthier for you. And so they had people blind taste test them, and they found that the people liked, like, you know, they ranked the full fat one, the taste and the flavor, the same as the one with the spices. So it's like those two were
you know, so using spices is what I'm trying to say, and things like that can help you reduce the bad in things, and people still like them just as much. Be the key takeaway there. So the health benefits then, just what we were saying, allows you to reduce like the salt, and these are great ones to use if you're looking at reducing salt. They kind of have that salty, you know, I guess they're a good replacement. Reducing sugar, especially in baked goods, or if you want things a little bit sweeter, if you reduce the
sugar in those dishes, then you can add these and they kind of help people think, you know, there's more sugar in there. So great thing about that. And just another, you know, each of the different herbs and spices, I have a class on this, but just each one does something different for you. It is so cool. Overall, though, they're almost all anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and yeah, antiviral, I guess. And so these are really keys, especially now. And so I just think about that. They found that actually putting some of the herbs and spices in salads will help like prevent the bacteria from forming as quickly, like in a dish. And it's really cool how it can do that. So really try to add these when you can for your health. So what Anne was saying too, you know, storage. The three things that damage the herbs are moisture, heat, and sunlight. So a lot of people keep them by the stove. You know, they have a little turner thing, and where all your different spices are, keep them there so you use them. But just remember though that, you know, that heat, any moisture like from the steam from the stove top, and then sunlight will deteriorate them more quickly. So I guess key would be to try to keep them, you know, away from that, you know, keep them in opaque containers where you can't see through. And then you're good to go on the dried. They don't spoil, so that's nice, but they do lose flavor and aroma. And the test then to check would be to kind of crush it in your hand. And if you don't, you know, smell anything anymore, it might be time to refresh that, or you might need the whole bottle in your dish. Just interesting also, McCormick spices, they should have a best by date on them. Otherwise, they're at least 16 years old. So if any of you are home right now, you can run to your cupboard and just see if you have any McCormick spices. But if they don't have a best by date, they're at least 16 years old. And then except for the black pepper, they stopped making those rectangular tins for at least 27 years. So if any of you have the rectangular tins, maybe it would be a good time to replace those. But they don't really go bad, you know, per se, but they could, you might need might not have as much flavor. So just some interesting things on that. So storing and washing. So just interesting facts. So I was reading a lot about this. So a lot of times, you know, I recommend just washing it right before you use it. But if herbs are dirty, they have found with studies, side-by-side studies, that if they have a lot of dirt on them, it will deteriorate the herbs more than washing them and then storing them that way. So if they do have some, you know, rinse them off and then store them kind of like you see in this picture here, in a jar, kind of like you would with flowers. And then the delicate ones you put in a bouquet, kind of like parsley and cilantro, the ones that don't have the woody stems. Like if you were to pick up a bouquet of whatever herb you picked, if it kind of flops over, I think of those as the more delicate ones. And then ones like rosemary and usually oregano, they'll kind of stand up for you. And those are the hardier ones. But the ones that'll flop over, you act kind of like flowers then. So you put those in the fridge and cover them with a bag, and that will keep them quite long. I've had cilantro, which sometimes, you know, you want to use, you know, sometimes if you can't grow it, you buy it in the store and you have this large amount. And so really it stores a long time there if you keep it that way and don't just wrap it in the bag. And, you know, once it starts going bad, then all of it goes bad. So try it this way and see what you think. And basil, it doesn't love the cold. So if you can keep that one out on your counter, it'll smell good. And that's how it loves that. So the hardier ones, you can just do a damp paper towel and you can stick them in the fridge. I've had rosemary, I just put it in a plastic bag. Sometimes it'll just last for a really long time. So that's really nice about that one. It's hardier like that. And then how to prepare them for your dishes. So you know, chefs will do different things. You can do the rough chop, you can do a chiffonade, you can do sprigs, you can do like the sturdier ones. You just like rosemary, like I was talking about, you run your fingers opposite of the stem. If you've ever probably made me familiar with that, but once I figured that out, it's kind of a life changer, right? You don't have to kind of try to figure out how to get them all off. And then the tender herbs, just, you know, you can remove the stems. You know, if they're soft stems, there's nothing wrong with eating those either. And they add a good, you know, sometimes stronger flavor to the dish. And you can use kitchen scissors to cut them, or sometimes people will even use pizza cutters. Depends on, sometimes people have trouble with their wrists and arthritis or anything like that. So just something you can do. So the chiffonade is those narrow ribbons then, but it just looks really pretty, and you can stack the leaves and then you roll it up and then you cut it that way. And to avoid bruising the herbs and, you know, retaining the optimal flavor, a sharp knife is really key. Somebody told me once, you don't want to macerate them like right into the cutting board. You know, if you are scraping them off the cutting board and there's like all this green like stuck in the cutting board, that's where a lot of the flavor will be too. So if you can just cut them a few times and use a sharp knife, then it will, I guess, keep that flavor, not lose it to the cutting board. General guideline when you're using herbs, think 1 to 3, okay? So the dried, it's concentrated down. So, you know, if you have fresher dried herbs, not the 27-year-old ones, it would be equal to about 1, right? 1 spoonful, and then times 3 of the fresh herbs, okay? And then, you know, start with small changes when you're doing this with a dish, because if you multiply a recipe, if you double a recipe per se, you don't always need to double the herbs. So just keep that in mind when you're making recipes then. So about 1 teaspoon is equal, 1 teaspoon of a dried would be about a tablespoon of fresh. So there's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, if that makes sense. We good there? Okay. So then just wanted to, you know, the delicate herbs like we were talking about, they kind of flop over. Basil, chives, cilantro, dill leaves, mint, parsley. Those I would just add towards the end of cooking then, because just like they're more delicate, right? They don't hold up as well in the cooked dish. So you could add them early, you just won't have the flavor, you know? So that's why it's best to add them at the end. And then in general, like the less delicate ones, oregano, rosemary, sage, and thyme, if you can add them during, you know, you have a little bit more time. Sometimes people even have added them at the beginning, things like that, but they can hold up a lot longer. Now we're just going to talk briefly about some popular fresh herb and food combinations. And so just Anne was talking, and you know, there is so many things to try, you guys. I would love to, I think it would be really fun, and maybe we can do this at the office sometime, and just plant like a ton of different basil varieties. You know, there's really fun ones like cinnamon, lemon, there's Thai, there's a purple one, and it'd just be, I think, interesting and fun to just try the different ones and understand how some of them, like the Thai one, cooks up better than maybe the sweet one that we might be used to. So I guess lots of fun things to try, and that's kind of what I want to get home with you today, is to try to think about trying some of these instead of using salt to flavor your dish, because they're going to add a lot of health to your dish. So nutrition, lots of vitamins. So one of the bottom things I have pictured there is a chimichurri sauce, and it's become very popular, but it's mostly made of parsley. And it might also have cilantro and oregano too, but if you have parsley, this is a great way to use it. And you add just some garlic, olive oil, oregano, and some red wine vinegar, and it's like kind of a tangy sauce. And they use a lot in Argentina, but it's really good on like things like flank steak or fish or things like that, or as a dipping sauce. So it's kind of popular and trendy. So that could be a fun one to try. And then pesto, which originated in Italy, that's the crushed garlic, and usually has some sort of nuts. So you could use pine nuts, are the most common one. And then basil is the one that's mostly used there. So I think basil is pesto usually. and then they have a herb teas added. So it's usually like a basil, a nut of some sort, usually pine nuts, and then such as like Parmesan or something. And they blend it with olive oil, and then you can use that as kind of, you can use it on pasta, you can use it on just different meats and things like that, or on sandwiches instead of mayonnaise, and it would have that good for you benefits. Herb dressings too, and I'll try to send out a recipe for that after the class then, just for an any herb pesto and any herb dressing, like a salad dressing. So you would just do like 1/4 of a cup of whatever herb you have, and you can mix and match different combinations of the vinegar and oil, and you can get some really good flavors on salad. So being creative there, and then just, you know, remembering sometimes the stocks, they're great to add with soups and things like that. So adding them, just like we were talking about, just think about every sort of course that you have, you could add them in there. Don't forget beverages or fruits or desserts either. So just talking about some examples, bruschetta, things like that would be great with basil, caprese. That's what's pictured there. That's the mozzarella, tomato, basil. And then basil also goes well with watermelon and feta, and in smoothies you could put in there. Great. Oregano, like we were talking about, like Anne was saying too, there's different types of this. So you can kind of see, you know, you might not like one oregano with a dish, but you could try another one. But it pairs well in things like beans and chicken. It goes really well in those things. And you see a lot of in Latin American dishes. And so that's the way to use that. Mint, you know, sometimes people struggle, you know, with how to use that. And it's great in water. You're like, iced tea, I got it. But don't forget fruit and desserts. And then tabbouleh uses a lot of mint also, which is an Israeli dish. You have to look that one up if you have a lot of mint to use. It's good. And but just desserts, you know, think of mint chocolate chip ice cream, and you know how we you know, have Andes mints and things like that. It goes well with sweet things like chocolates. And then the fruit, it goes well paired with like watermelon, or if you ever make a fruit cup, it's great just putting a sprig in there. And then rosemary, like Anne was talking about, it can work as a skewer that can give the whatever you're stewing some flavor, and it's also really good on potatoes and meats. Cilantro, you see in Asian, Caribbean, Indian, Latin American dishes, but it's a lot in like things like salsa, guacamole. And I have to tell you, I've made this avocado cream. So if anybody likes avocados, they just kind of, we're in season here, but avocado, you pair it with cilantro and lime juice and you blend it up, but it is a great sauce for, you can put it on anything, just dip things in it, or, you know, meats and stuff, like in kind of like a taco type dish. It's really good, or fish. So just think about the garnishes then. So making your dish even pretty, you know, at night, just enjoying what you eat, and then eating the herbs too. And here are just some other ideas. Especially this is great when you're just trying out different herbs and you're trying to figure out which ones you like the best. Sometimes you can mix just a little bit with some cream cheese, and just do different herbs mixed that way, and then try it like on a little piece of bread or a cracker, and you can kind of get a different taste that way, you know, just to try to understand what flavor is different. And then herbal vinegars, so these could be great for Christmas presents. And when you make that herbal vinegar, it's great for adding to salad dressings, marinades, scrambled eggs. You know, there's lots of things you can do. So when you do the herbal vinegars, you kind of have to treat them a little bit like canning. So don't get scared of that, but just make sure you sterilize everything, and there's directions to how to do it. So you just want to follow that to do that safely then. You just kind of heat the vinegar, you're sanitizing the container, and then you sanitize the herbs by, you know, dipping them in a solution. But then you'll make sure to keep that safe for a while. And oils, so those are a little trickier than the vinegars. So with the vinegars, you have an acid. So with the herb oils, they've been linked to cases of botulism, and then so food-borne illness. And so you want them to make sure to follow like a research-based methods, but it can definitely be done. And if you're looking for something quick, you can always just do the herb oils then and just use them kind of within the next 2 or 3 days and keep them in the refrigerator, and that's fine. Then you don't have to follow such rigorous methods. It's just that if you're storing them for a long time, they can get that bacteria. So I wanted to make sure to say that. And then freezing and drying, Anne briefly talked about that, but just lots of things you can do for that. It works best then once you freeze them to use them in cooked foods. Obviously, they don't usually have the same texture. So chopping them, you can chop them up. I know a lot of people, they do the ice cube tray way. So you'll put the herbs with either water or oil. So the oil will turn black, but don't be scared. It will, when it thaws, it'll turn back. You can put them in those cubes then and pop them out and then put them in a Ziploc bag. And then whenever you're making soups or tomato sauce or something like that, you can just pop in an extra basil, things like that to give it your garden, garden touch. So be a great way to put those in there. And then drying them. So drying, you want to, try to do them right as quickly and rapidly as possible, just to avoid losing any of the flavor. So some of them, kind of like Anne was talking about, like the basil and the more delicate ones, they don't do well drying in the sun because they'll just like roast them. So you actually want to take them in a well ventilated area in your house, probably, or just a darker place. And so it's just that with the sun, they reduce the flavor and the color. So trying to use them, dry them right before the flowers burst open, that would be the key time to do that there. And you can use a dehydrator. Also, a lot of people you could do your oven and leave it open. The thing is, the oven, you don't want to cook them, right? And so the idea would be to keep the oven below 100 if you can. They recommend sometimes 190 or below, but just like the best results are with, a little bit around 100. And it's hard to get the oven to 100 degrees. So they've actually found some luck microwaving them to dry them. Some people have done the experiments just on which way works the best again. And I love looking at different studies like that, which is the best. But just microwaving them at even 30-second increments, and then you want them just, crispy, but you don't want to cook them, right? So doing it that way. And some of them will hold up fine. Like we were talking about the hardier ones, those you can just, you could dry a little bit in the sun, like the rosemary, things like that. And if Anne, you have anything else to chime in on that, but just some of those that are hardier, they'll hold up better for that drying then. You don't always have to do them so quickly. So like we were talking about, there's different ways to do it. Dehydrator is great also. And then the air drying, just what I was saying, works well for the low moisture ones like marjoram too, oregano, rosemary, and I think dill will do okay also. So the ones that are a little bit more finicky would be the basil, chives, mint. They contain more moisture, so it's good to do those in the oven or dehydrator. All right. And so just cooking tips then, just, try to remember, use what you have on hand. You can make a rub. That's another option too, crushing it in a mortar and pestle releases some of those flavors again, and then trying to use it all, whereas, not getting it all in the cutting board, but and then just remember, you can under season, you can always add more, and then just see how much you can do without adding salt then. And experiment with the different cuisines too. Each of those different cuisines uses a different profile of herbs. So Greek, they use like oregano and then like the parsley, and I think of basil over it in the Italian, and then Thai, they use different ones, right? So if you can kind of figure out what fish you want and then match the herbs and spices with that. So just the idea would be to have fun. And so that would be the last slide that I have then. And we have a short evaluation following this, but we'd love any questions. So if you would like to unmute yourselves, and Bethany, if you have anybody there who has questions, feel free to unmute, or you guys can type them in the chat box. But thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it. So that's all I have. That's our contact info. And I put our email addresses in the chat box if that helps. So that's what's there. Are there any questions that you guys have?
can't hear you, Bethany. Shoot. I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, thank you, Bethany, and everybody at the library. I think you have a question in the chat, Andrea, about herbs for hypothyroid.
Okay, I don't know any specifics about that. I can do a quick search and try to get back to you on that, but I don't know. I don't have any expertise in that area. I'm sorry, but I can. Catherine, if you want to send me an email, I will look it up. See if there's anything else I can find. That might help. Welcome. Bethany says it might be good.
Thank you so much, everybody. If you have questions later on, you can see our contact information. Also, our plant clinic at our office is open to phone and email. So you can call our main office number. I'll put it in the chat, and also the email for the plant clinic. If you have any plant growing types of questions, they're always available to answer them.
Well, if nobody has anything else, I guess. Okay. And do you have anything else to add other than what you just said?
Yeah, let me just get this typed into the chat so everybody has the contact for the office, and also
Wait, okay.
and so yes, and I put in the chat for the plant clinic the phone number and email, and that's related to any growing plant questions that you may have. And then we'll send out these links and things in email with the survey as well.
All right. Thank you guys all for coming today.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Hi.